Welcome to the Cauldron. This is a community, a space to share, inspire and support. I'm your host, Annette Poacher, and each episode I welcome real, raw and powerful conversations from everyday individuals with extraordinary experiences to the organisations lifting others up. This is a place where truth is spoken, healing is honoured and resilience is celebrated. This is the Cauldron, where we sit with people who have walked through fire, found their strength, rebuilt, or simply kept going when life asked more of them. Here we acknowledge the organisations, leaders, and volunteers who are instrumental in their journey. Welcome to the Cauldron. My name is Annette Poacher, and today I have Michael Cox, founder of Eats for the Streets, joining me in the studio. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael.
No worries. Glad to be here.
A few weeks ago, I travelled to Caboolture to meet you and to gain a deeper understanding of the work that you do. The experience was really humbling and grounding, seeing firsthand the compassion, commitment and humanity you and your volunteers bring to every interaction gave me an appreciation for the impact you are having in our community. But as I walked back to my car, I was thinking, where would these individuals go if not for you and for people like you who step in with such heart and dedication? It was a powerful reminder of why your work matters so much. That moment really stayed with me. It was the push that I needed to continue with this project, to shine a light on all the wonderful work our charity organisations do in and around the Sunshine Coast, to highlight the incredible work being done to help people get access to support, care, kindness and connection. So let's dive in. In the past month, I've spoken to a lot of different people to get this project up and running. One thing that's really stood out is the passion that people have for their work, which shows up instantly in those conversations. And it's made me reflect on what drives someone to go beyond simply wanting to do good, but to actually taking action. Because so many of us, we all care, but then there are the people who get out there and make things happen. And you, Michael, are one of those people. So I'd love to start by asking what sparked the creation of Eats for the Streets.
Well, so I go to church at Emerge in Morayfield, and the first day I was there, it was one of the Mission Sundays, which is the last Sunday of every month. And up on the screen, they basically were going through all the programs that the church does, both domestically and internationally. And one of those was a homeless outreach program where we go out in teams. We go up and down Morayfield Road, through the hub, through the lakes, through a few of the other hotspots where people tend to gather. And we basically just wander around. We got bags of dry food, toiletries, blankets, things like that. And we just went around and showed people that, hey, there's people out there that still care. I wanted to do something more, but I didn't want to do something that was carefully put, like, not under the church itself. I wanted to do something that was more community sort of focused, but without the religious connotations, because I didn't want there to be any sort of barriers or restrictions in place where people might feel uncomfortable because they might not share the faith, or they may have been scorned in the past and things like that. So I wanted to create something that as many people across the community could attend and feel comfortable at. So, that was kind of what kicked us off.
I know some people do feel a little bit inhibited if they're not religiously minded. When we were chatting when I was down there, I said to you, so how many people do we have that come here every single Saturday? And you said to me around about 100 people, which over the course of a year is over 5,000 people. So you're reaching a huge amount of people from across lots of different demographics that come to you on a Saturday. Whereabouts are you guys? Because I know that you said that you had changed locations recently.
Yeah, so when you came and saw us, we were at the Caboolture hub. Yeah, we've only been there for about 4 weeks at the moment. We're averaging around about 100 to 120 people that are coming through there each week. Previous to that, we were at Centenary Lakes next to the fountain, and we'd been there every Saturday for the past 18 months, where we were seeing anywhere between 200 to 300 people on a Saturday. The thing is, like, that demographic mixture that's just people walking their dogs. Some of the sports crowd would come down. We get a lot of the elderly that live in the local residential areas and all that sort of stuff that want to really connect with people, so they would come down. We would obviously get people who are experiencing homelessness, people that are living in their cars that don't feel comfortable approaching some of the other homeless sort of services because there's a bit of a stigma that can be attached there. We get people coming down that just report feeling lonely. We get people that are experiencing DV and coming down to the lakes was the only space that they felt safe. We were getting so many different elements of the community coming down, and that was what we really trying to achieve, was that mixture of the community, so that people who are going through some things and people who are experiencing stuff can interact with people that are perhaps not experiencing that, but they have their own sort of stuff going on, but building that space where people can just support each other naturally, because as an organisation, obviously, we can't be everything to all people all the time, but as a community, we most certainly can.
You just touched on the next point that I was going to raise with you in terms of the broad demographic that I saw. There were people from all ages and all walks of life that obviously come to you for support. But what I sort of took away from that also was that, like you just said, you're not just providing food. There was a real sense of community, familiarity, stability. People know that rain, hail or shine, you'll be there.
Yeah, well, contrary to what our name might suggest, we use food as a tool. We use the sharing of a meal as an equalizer. So when, say, we have people that come down that are experiencing whatever, we have support services that come down as well and are actually among the crowd to mingle with people, particularly in circle, and they do some absolutely brilliant work. But they themselves, as an organisation, were facing a bit of a barrier because every time they would come into, say, an encampment or something like that, they would be attached to either the Rangers, Department of Housing or police. And naturally, that's already going to create a very defensive system. So they weren't able to connect with people to actually give the supports that they needed. So we invited them to come along to our program to use that space where they can sit down one-on-one with someone for 2-3 hours if necessary, hear their story, hear what they're struggling with, and without being some tick and flick sort of scenario, they're sharing a meal and actually connecting on a human-to-human level. And so far, Jack, Shelley and the team over at Encircle have reported some absolutely phenomenal outcomes from that, because now they're people helping people. They're not some government-funded organisation running around trying to cure a problem. So that's what we really strived to achieve, and that's the sort of stuff that we're actually kind of getting done.
I wanted to ask you to share a story with me, if you have one in mind, that's particularly stayed with you during the journey that you've been on in starting Eats for the Streets.
As I aforementioned, because I was doing the Monday night rounds for about a year before I'd actually launched the Eats for the Streets program with my Eats team. So I'd already built a pretty good relationship with a lot of the people who were on the streets throughout Caboolture, particularly in Centenary Lakes, because at the time there was around about 40 odd people that were living in the lakes alone. There was one individual, and I'm not going to name names, but he's an absolute sweetheart and wouldn't hurt a fly, just an absolute kind soul. And I'd seen him a few times on the Monday nights and all this sort of stuff. And just showing him that kindness, you could see it just lit up his face every time we'd find him and be like, "Hey mate, how you doing?" And then just after we'd launched the Eats program, probably would have been about week 3 or 4 perhaps. So it would have been about April last year. He came down, June last year. He'd come down and was sort of poking around, and we've got the gazebo set up with the barbecues and all that sort of stuff, and he's trying to sort of figure out what's going on. And he turned to Liz and asked, "Well, what's this all about?" And she had expressed, like, we're the Eats guys, we're here, we chuck on a free community barbecue, and so everyone's welcome. You can come grab a feed, have a chat, and go from there. And he sort of was like a bit taken back and was asking, like, "Well, how much is it?" And because everyone does that, no matter how many times you say free, there's still like that. But what? How much? What's the cost? So he's sitting here having this conversation with Liz, and Liz had followed up with, it's free, and we come down here each Saturday, and we do what we can, and all that sort of stuff. And he asked, like, why? Now our motto is where everyone has a place at the table. It's wrapped around our gazebo. It's on all of our stuff. And Liz had explained to this man that, it's because here we don't discriminate based on demographic. We don't discriminate based on like if you're doing it tough or not, because we think that everyone should be treated equally. And from there, and this man's in his 50s, just burst into tears and was just expressing that. And I'm getting a bit welled up myself, but yeah, he was just expressing about how like he's been on the streets for years. Could never quite make life work. Just things kept happening, and he was telling us how he hasn't felt like a human in years because people would walk past and they'd say mean things, or they'd spit on him, or just treat him like absolute garbage, simply because he's there. And like this man, he wouldn't hurt a fly. I've now known him for nearly 3 years, and every single time he's nothing but pleasant. And to see this dude just break down like that because of a simple act of kindness and just that simple expression to remind people that, hey, just because you've got stuff going on doesn't mean that you should be treated as some sort of subhuman or that you're not one of us. And that's what we're really trying to achieve with the EATS program. Is we're on the streets for a wide variety of reasons, and we're trying to really make sure that people do feel comfortable coming forward. So that one really stuck.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And because they've walked a variety of different paths that are different to someone else, they usually are people that are taken aback by the generosity because they're just simply not used to it. How has this affected you personally, this journey that you've been on? Because I know that you also work full time. You give up a lot of your spare time, obviously, to keep this running.
So for me personally, like I am not the person I was 2-3 years ago. I'm ex-military myself. I got injured during the 2020 bushfires. I was subsequently medically discharged in 2021. I really struggled with depression and all that sort of stuff after leaving defence. And it took me quite a long while to get into a position where I could sort of feel anything other than sadness or rage. I didn't want to be that person. And that was a big part of the reason that drew me to the church. And that was my own sort of personal journey along that line. But I wanted to build my own compassion because I was not a compassionate person. I was still very military minded, still very much like, come on, sort it out sort of attitude. I didn't want to be that person. So I decided, the best way to do this is to learn and actually understand for myself and try and rehumanize the people on the streets. And this isn't something I actually tell a lot of people, but that was a big part of the reason why I got involved in the first place, is because I wanted to not be that person. And as soon as I started getting involved with the Emerge program on the Monday nights, that immediately started to just melt that away within me. But yeah, it really sort of calloused me to sort of the needs of others. So I wanted to be a better person, so I decided to jump in feet first, and I didn't think it'd take me this far.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do the podcast is to put a voice behind organisations like yours so that people get a better understanding of who you are, what you do, and the people that you're reaching. Those people, like that gentleman you were referring to earlier, they fall through the cracks. And so we simply need people like you, even though it's been a personal journey for you as well. It's a twofold thing. You've come out of it a different person, and then you're also helping people along the way, which is the objective of your organisation. I wanted to ask you about some of the hurdles and the barriers that you've come across in starting EATS for the streets.
So any organisation trying to get off the ground, maintaining any sort of financial footing is always difficult. Sharing the load among other volunteers and all that sort of stuff is also a pretty key sort of challenge. For us, and for me personally, it was a little bit easier in that space because as I said, I was medically discharged from the army. I'm on a military pension, so I didn't need to draw a wage from EATS, and still haven't and never will. And I made that vow when I first kicked off, because this isn't about money for me. This is about actually trying to build something that makes a difference. I was very fortunate that I came across several key members quite soon and early in the piece that were also as passionate and aligned as myself to be able to actually get this thing off the ground and rolling. At first, I was all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed like anyone is that wants to start an organisation because they think they're going to kick off and the donations are going to flow and everyone's going to get behind you and, you're going to change the world and you're going to fix everything overnight. And quite honestly, like when I first started, I went around and I met all the existing organisations that have been in operation for decades. And first I felt like they were being a little bit standoffish and I was a bit curious as to why. But then I've seen it myself where people come in really, really passionate, but they haven't got themselves footed well, and their own finances might not be as in order as they could be. And then eventually, after a few months, they recognise that, well, actually, it takes an enormous amount of work, and unless you have some financial backing from the get-go, sooner or later you need to go back to work. You need to be able to sustain yourself. So I've seen several fledgling orgs already sort of burn out within the first few months because they hadn't had their own private stuff sorted.
These people obviously start out with good intentions, and maybe if they had some community around them, they may have been more successful. I did notice when I was down visiting you, the van, the car, and the volunteers and all the people that are accessing it. And I'm thinking to myself, we've got a car that needs to be run. We've got a van that needs to be registered. We've got gas bottles that need to be filled. There's so much that goes on other than just handing over meals to people, and all that costs money. I did notice on the Eats for Streets vans that there's a list of sponsorship. And I know you have Liz, who's one of your right hand. The volunteers that you have, how's that going for you? Have you got enough? What do you need from the community?
Yeah, well, you're right. It definitely does cost a metric fortune to keep doing what we're doing. Now, fortunately, we do have business sponsors now, and that's where we're able to fundraise for the food truck, as well as we received a grant from the state government for that particular facility. But we have ongoing sponsors and businesses, and some don't even like to be named and don't even want us sort of promoting that, which I find staggering in and of itself.
You do have amazing people behind you, as well as your army of volunteers, which is great, because without them, you can only spread yourself so thin.
I was going to say, because Liz has been there since day dot. A lot of the early elements of the program was actually her idea. So because mine was the food truck, I was like, right, how do I get from registering a name to a food truck? Because that's what I wanted to achieve. And her idea was the soft start down in the lakes with the gazebo and the barbecue and all that sort of stuff. And and that's the thing, is that like I said, we got some very key people very early in the piece. And she saw the vision that I had, and she was extremely aligned, and came up some really cool ways to get there, which is just phenomenal. And that's the fact, is that like without Liz, we probably wouldn't have got past the name stage, to be honest. So a lot of that was her. We've had some really awesome volunteers over the last nearly 2 years that have been able to really, really pour in. Some have had to withdraw due to medical issues and things like that, and just life changes. The amount of free time that people have varies month to month. We also have Cass. She's come on at the start of the year, and she's just been absolutely unreal. She's essentially the right hand of the right hand, and so between myself, Liz, and Cass, we can now sort of rotate a little bit. So every now and then, one of us will get a weekend off, because that's the thing. Like for the last nearly 2 years, I think I've had maybe 7 Saturdays off, and it's a bit hectic, because we also do a Friday night program, and we also do the Monday night, and we do all sorts of stuff. Many things with certain demographics that we don't promote, because we don't want to potentially compromise their privacy and things like that, because we do programs with kids and all that sort of stuff as well. So we don't want to sort of murky those waters, and that's why even our social media, we only typically take photos of the stuff as we're setting up or packing down, not when people are there, because we don't want to compromise people's privacy. And as I said earlier, we get people that are experiencing DV and all that sort of stuff, and the last thing that we want is to be publishing photos with potentially sensitive content. But we have a really awesome team. Like any volunteer team, of course, we could always do with more. But it's a matter of finding the people that are aligned in what we're doing, that because we get some passionate people that'll come down and get really enthusiastic, but they have a different idea of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And sometimes that their ideas can actually potentially be harmful to the people that we're serving. Some people don't work out, but we try to sort of vet as well as we.
It's a fine line, isn't it? I mean, I think people come along with those good intentions, and like you said, sometimes it can just not quite align with what the focus and the direction that you guys want to go in. What's sort of happening over the next 12 months? What's the plan?
So our next 12 months, big focus post, obviously we have our Christmas banquet coming up on the 13th of December. After that, we'll be shut over Christmas, New Year's. Early next year, I want to really start pushing into the Bribie Island space. So Liz and I went down there earlier this week, actually, and met with some of the other local organisations that are down there that are already doing similar sorts of things, because we want to support them. We want to get behind them and try and help expand their programs, because the demographic over there, yes, they have people who are struggling financially and they have the homeless and all that sort of stuff, but they have a massive elderly population. A lot of people seem to forget that when you've got an 85-year-old couple that's on a fixed income of $1,114 a fortnight or whatever it is that the pension currently is, and their rent goes up $200 a week, where are they scratching around to find the money for food and all that sort of stuff? And that's a generation that doesn't waste money. And they're flying so close to the wire, it's not even funny. I've spoken to other organisations that have very deep roots in that sort of space, and they've reported that they've got pensioners on their books that they serve who have cut off the electricity to the house because they can't afford to have electricity and a roof over their head. And it's just staggering.
This is the reality of how people are living in Australia.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is they shouldn't be. And, the more people that I can reach and doing these interviews like I am with you to reinforce the fact that there is so many people in our community on the other end of the scale that are in a position to help that choose not to. If I said to you, Michael Cox, I've got unlimited resources, what's the first thing you would do?
Unlimited.
All
righty, let's start. Without crashing the global economy, because that is important. Now, I would see, like I said, I at first was focusing on obviously the young people who are living on the streets and all that sort of stuff. But for me personally, seeing the wide sort of cross section of the community that I have, my immediate plan would be to build semi-socialized sort of lifestyle villages for the over 50s. That end of the spectrum is a population that really thrives when you actually cluster them. That end of the spectrum are the ones who are becoming malnourished, and obviously the older you get, the less springy your body is, and it can't really handle being malnourished, and then they become a massive drain on the healthcare system because their systems are shutting down because they're not safe, they're not eating properly, they're stressed, all that sort of stuff. So by doing that, because there's so many rentals throughout Moreton Bay, and a big chunk of them are currently occupied by pensioners and retirees. So by getting that populace into more appropriate housing that you can go, look, jump in there, pay some reasonable rate to actually maintain the place. So it's actually a self-sustaining system. But by securing that end of the population spectrum, that frees up all the rentals on the bottom end, which means that, well, basic law of supply and demand, the more that are on the market, the lower the price. So it means that families who are currently living on the streets can jump in there. It means that people who are on the waiting list for social housing and things like that, perhaps they can actually afford rentals now and they don't have to be on that waiting list. Because at the end of the day, like, we're not Thanos, we can't just snap our fingers and build all these high rises, but a realistic approach that could actually be implemented pretty quickly, and quite frankly the government could pull this off within the next 5 to 10 years and fix this situation. The framework exists, the legislation exists, the organisations that have the experience in that space already exist. Like, everything already exists, it just needs some funding behind it.
Someone to pull the trigger. Really?
When you see the federal government out there splashing the cash on the things that it is, and then completely disregarding the fact that Aussies are starving, and we have pensioners who are starving in their own homes, and some are, starving in the dark because they can't even afford electricity after working their entire lives, and with the promise that, hey, you work 50 years and, we'll look after you when you retire. And then all of a sudden, they've lived up to their end of the bargain. They've worked their 50 years, they've paid their taxes, and then they hit retirement, and now we seem to have forgotten about them. We're an aging population. We're only sliding towards that end of the scale, but we seem to forget that chunk actually exists, and we're focusing, in my opinion, in the wrong sort of areas that just create more and more problems when we could actually address that end. And it's as close to a silver bullet as I can actually think. And so that's what I'd do with your unlimited fund.
I just want to go back a little bit because you've kind of touched on a nerve with me. I fall into that category that you're talking about. At the moment, I'm working 2 jobs and I can look after myself. My situation comes from divorce and family law court, and I won't go into the details, but the wash up from that has meant I'm a mid-50s-year-old woman. When it comes to the time where I can't work anymore or I get sick, I'm going to fall into that category of those people that you were just talking about. How many other people like me are also in that situation? The biggest percentage of homeless people in this country is women in their 50s. So that's something that I'm absolutely really passionate about, and I would be happy to advocate because I think it's a fantastic idea. Communal living, the other thing it's going to do, it's going to free up some of that income that they do get from the government so they can nourish themselves and they can look after themselves and they can survive to a certain standard of living. People that have worked their entire lives and then find themselves in these situations, we should be ashamed of ourselves as a country. Nobody in Australia should be homeless. We're a very rich country. The resources are going in the wrong directions. And here's the thing, you and I having this conversation, it really is quite an easy fix. It's not friggin' brain surgery, is it? It's like very simple. It's like a domino effect. You do this and then it opens up the doors for this group of people, and that opens up a door for these group of people, and it takes the pressure off all of these different demographics that are experiencing so much difficulty in our community. And I knew that you would have all these amazing ideas. It's about compassion and kindness, and it's very difficult for people. I try not to hold it against people that have not been through adversity and not experienced the homelessness, and trying to keep a roof over your head. Once you've been through it, you then have compassion and kindness for other people that are going through it. Hopefully these conversations will open up the gateway for people to understand a little bit more about what it means to have to go through all that. I fear that we have become a selfish society rather than a selfless society.
Absolutely. And everyone seems to, well, you see with societies, like the better the times, the bigger your circle. And the worse the times, the smaller your circle gets. And you go, in comparison to the rest of the world, we still have it phenomenal. Our poorest citizens still live better than the overwhelming majority of mankind alive today, and pretty much better than any human that existed before 100 years ago. So I think a big part of the problem in society now is, you're right, we're closing ourselves off to be more self-centered and less communal-based. Like my response to pretty much everything is community. If we're going to rely on the government to fix our problems, as a community, we can do far more with far less. And they're actually long-term sustainable outcomes, because people feel like they're actually a part of something, not just getting a handout. And I see it day in, day out with even the youth group that the church runs and all that sort of stuff, where like these people need a sense of belonging. So if I had to boil my mantra down to a series of sentences, I can't do the one.
That's okay. I'll let you off.
Yes, but in my opinion, belonging has to come before behaviour. If we allow people that are on the outskirts to feel as if they're not part of society, they will rebel against that society, and then it's where you see that sort of extreme antisocial behaviour. The only real way, and you can't sort of pressure that out of people, but accept them again. Remember that they're a human being. They've got stuff going on. And everyone has things going on. I've been pretty nasty myself in the past. Not something I'm proud of, but people have stuff going on. And if we as a society can actually accept people that, you are a human, you've got stuff going on, you still matter, and you still have intrinsic value. And let's see what happens when people actually feel connected again. Let's see what happens when they feel as part of us again. I'm very convinced that that is the best way to see that extreme antisocial behaviour actually stamped out.
I think what you're saying is, instilling self-worth, respect, confidence, all of those things from just starting at that point and working forward from that. And you're in the trenches. You guys are on the ground. You're doing this weekend in, out. And you know what works and what doesn't work. Getting emotional. Thank you so much for what you do, because you are making a difference, and I really appreciate you chatting with me today. I look forward to catching up with you again maybe a little further down the track and see how things are going and how you guys have expanded. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Cauldron. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. Please follow and share our social media pages for more episodes. Until next time, be kind, be caring, be connected.